Hi, Sophia. We're going to take a look at your rhythm repetition and Notan postings here. So we'll jump right into it. Let's take a look at what we have. Alternating rhythms, progressive rhythms. Looks like you're doing a pretty good job of identifying these. We'll get into more specifics. Hopefully you've taken a look at the overview video where I'm talking more about what the reasoning is behind the project itself. We kind of do it, we talk about those things before you do the project. I make those short overview videos to kind of talk to you about what I was intending for you to experience, and hopefully you got out of the project. And these talks here are more about individual things that I'm observing within your pictures. And one of the first things that I'm identifying here is the range at which you are making photographs. In other words, the distance you are away from the pictures. Here you are, approximately, I would say maybe, 2 feet away from everything. And that's something to observe. What is it about that is sort of drawing you to it? Whether you know that or not, whether you're aware that you are making photographs that feel like you are getting in there or you are relatively close up. Now, these aren't macro photos, meaning that they're not like totally zoomed in, but they are feeling like you are picking out a detail in a lot of ways. Like you are saying, forget about all this other stuff. Let's kind of focus in on this sort of segment of a thing. And that's important because you are moving toward content. You are giving a point of view or a perspective that way. So that's a really important part of it. There are a few compositional cleanups that we want to pay very close attention to. This is an excellent strategy. The reflective, using reflections is always going to be one of those things that helps you out. This repetition of the window here, very good. If you had lined it up a little bit better, you get that alternating rhythm pattern more formally set up. You've got a few things here like the lock. You've got a few lines here that aren't quite participating in the rest of the composition. And when I say participating, I mean lending to the movement and lending to the overall intent of the image, which seems to be the business that's going on right in here. And so when we're making these kinds of images, we want to discover what it is that we're trying to look at and then do our best to get rid of everything else except for that. All of this is really beautiful, even where it's sort of double imaged because of the reflection, because you can kind of see a little bit through the window and all of that. It's just wonderful and beautiful. Even the way you've constructed the line work here versus the line work here, all of that works really well. Here, this is, it looks like just an abstract study, not a whole lot going on here. But then you get into here and how you can sort of get the abstract study, but add a layer to it. That's where these cast shadows really start to happen. And that's the next photo project that we work on. So whether you knew it or not, you were getting into the next project here with this rhythm and repetition. So that's something to think about as well. When you get into something that's very, very simple, very kind of open-ended, you can use cast shadows in a very beautiful way. So these pattern studies that you're doing here, these are all fine. You just want an intent for them. They're very graphic. They could be used in a kind of graphic design way. But something like this speaks more about what you're trying to look at. The shallow depth of field, it's still a detail, but you've got the shallow depth of field. You've got a lot of depth in movement going on here. Still a few things that could be resolved a bit better, things like back here and so on. It's all about reduction, remember. Here you've got the repetition going on. Now we have this object being repeated, and I mentioned in several other videos about like not repeating photographs that are too close to one another. That doesn't mean you can't explore an object, and so I think this and this is a good thing. What you're doing, this is exploring it in a healthy way, because you're offering majorly different perspectives of this one versus this one, even though it's in a very similar style. That's a very good thing. So when you hear me talking about let's avoid having very similar objects or very similar subjects or very similar photographs in the same series on a posting, I'm talking more about ones that look like you took a picture here and then moved 6 inches and then took another photograph without even refocusing and things. These are different enough that I think they are exploring a lot. This one being maybe the less of interesting one. It's getting there though. You have some really cool things going on here as far as movement and stuff, but I think it's almost there. Undulating, excuse me, I had to take a sip there. Undulating rhythm is a unique sort of challenge, because it is basically it's a rhythm without a motif. So there's definitely going to be a pattern that happens. There's a rhythm that's established, but the motif, the repeating element, is a little bit more elusive. When you have something like the leaves and things, you can get the established rhythm that way, but to really push it, you want to move into even more of an abstraction, like isolating something right in here, and you can really get an undulating rhythm going. When you're identifying objects like this, it becomes a repetition of leaves. And so when you have a repetition of an object where you have a subject where there is a motif and there's a repetition like that, but that repetition is random, that lacks a little bit of a pattern, that's dissonant rhythm. So there's these two sort of on the side. You have the progressive, you have the alternating, and then you have dissonant and undulating. Dissonant is where you have the motif, you have an object that's repeating, but it doesn't really have a discernible rhythm to it. And then you have undulating rhythm, which is a repeating thing that has a rhythm, but the motif is sort of absent. So here, you can transform those things very easily by moving very close in or isolating some of these areas where you're no longer identifying these things as subject and they become just pure movement. Then you're getting into the undulating rhythm. Regardless, you've got some beautiful light going on here. This is wonderful. All this stuff is really awesome. So let's move into your shadows, cast shadows and spaces. So you've got the basic idea here. Even more than basic, you've got a really solid handle, looks like, on using shadows for the composition. This is where I'm really wanting the class to start moving into using the entire picture plane, starting to use elements that are not subject-based to communicate well, where we're using light to really start to express what we mean to say, what's important to us. And shadows are one part, and then light or highlights are the other part. So as we move into more transformative light projects, that's going to be the light part. This is the shadow part, which is the cast shadows, and then we have the spaces in between, which are the negative space. So you've done a beautiful job here where you're incorporating some of the objects, and then you've got, again, this repetition that's happening. You can see what happens is you've got this vastly blank space going on, and of the ground, and without this stuff, it would just be like ho-hum, right? I mean, if it was a cloudy day where there was no cast shadows, there wouldn't be anything to see here. Yet at the same time, if you just took a picture of a chair and a table, what would that mean? But here you've got the bottle, you've got the chairs, you've got this sort of scene that speaks of something mysterious, right? We don't see what's happening back there, but we can kind of witness what's happening. That's the power of what we're doing here. Even this, where we're seeing the shadow of the dog on the ground like this. This getting into some spaces in between, I think this is an excellent job. What we're doing with spaces in between is really identifying those empty spaces that are created by solid objects. And what we're doing is trying to create shapes that way. And by allowing these shapes to run off the edges the way that they are, that's helping. These overlapping spaces is also helping. So a way to improve something like this, there's the tree. Everyone has a tree. If you go through these projects, you'll see that everyone posted at least one tree for spacing the spaces. But a way to improve this would have been to allow more of this tree to run off the edges here. And that would have really given you more shape within here. It's a really interesting photo nonetheless. Less of this fence, since it is acting as a sort of grounding area. We don't want it to block. So it's taking up almost half of the photograph here. If we had maybe a third, maybe just a little bit down here with that, and maybe even a little bit more out of focus, if you could have made it more out of focus. This little sliver's awesome, but we've got a little bit too much of this this tree. I know that's nitpicking. We're only talking about composition. I'm not talking about the value of the photographs. I'm talking about how you can manipulate this composition to really fine tune it. This is maybe the equivalent of a, here we all in cooking class and I'm coming over and needs a little less garlic in there. The garlic is good, but we got a little bit too much there. That kind of thing, right? So we like your recipe, just went a little bit overboard on the tree here. Something like this would have really been, over the top had we cropped. Again, making these shapes is what we were looking for. That would have really helped. This is an interesting take. I think if we had come in and focused out the things that you are really interested in, which is this activity right here. See, with photography, it's all about reduction. It's all about either out of focus or cropping or getting closer or moving an inch. All of that stuff is what photography is about. It is about light, and it is about reducing things down to the most essential elements. That's the process. The photograph itself is just a recording of that process. It's about you seeing, it's about you observing what's in front of you, and all of the things that you have to say about it. And then that is what the camera records. You use the camera to record it in specific ways. We can use our own aesthetics to calibrate the camera. We use the controls, we use the camera lens and stuff like that to suit our needs. It's not the other way around. The camera doesn't take good pictures. The camera records what we're looking at. It's us that have to tell the camera what to do. The camera is totally non-biased. It doesn't care what's in front of it. It only will record what we tell it to record. So you're doing a beautiful job with these images. I think you're right where you need to be, and even probably a little bit ahead of where we need to be on your photography. I would really encourage you to jump into some of the other photo classes because I think there's a lot for you to explore here. And I would be really interested to see how you take some of the more advanced projects and work with them. So that's what I have for you. And I look forward to seeing more photos. Bye now.